If you were to ask any software developer what one of their least favorite parts of development was, they would probably say debugging. Debugging, while it is important, it is a very time-consuming and often frustrating part of software development. Whether it's fixing issues that you've created in your code or fixing issues that others have created in the past that you're going back and fixing now. It's ultimately necessary to get software working as intended. Now, what if I told you that debugging could be skipped almost entirely? Because, as it turns out, you don't need to debug if you just do it right the first time. Hello, my name is Payne Meade, and today I'll be talking about cleanroom software engineering. Cleanroom software engineering was created by Dr. Harlan Mills from IBM, and it was released first in 1981, although it didn't become popularized until around 1987. And it's called cleanroom because it's based off the clean rooms in different production environments where keeping the product clean is much easier than cleaning any mess that it would gather in a normal production environment, such as in wafer fabrication plants. Now, this software development philosophy is similar in the way that it is designed around through the process of development having as little issues as possible, meaning you don't have to go back and do ideally any debugging after you're done with this section of the software. Cleanroom software engineering aims to achieve this through a number of ways. Now, one way is development is done incrementally. For instance, a function or a section of the software will be chosen for a period of development, and then the team will work at this until it is done, and only when it is done, when it is working completely as intended. Because these short development periods aim to get simple functions perfected, there is no unit testing for the code. The code is only statically verified. That's because either the code does what it's intended to do, or it doesn't. Keeping things this simple is how cleanroom software engineering aims to achieve its goal. And it is only able to keep this simplicity due to its emphasis on the design part of the development process. There is a bigger emphasis on design than in some other software development philosophies. And that is because to keep things simple and to keep things moving and everything going as planned, there needs to be a lot of planning. Each step needs to be thought out, and everything needs to be accounted for. For instance, if a existing or external service is going to be used within the software, it needs to be accounted for early on. They need to decide whether or not they're going to use this or create their own solution later on in the software, because adding it later will definitely add a lot more issues than is going to be accounted for in this development philosophy. And to get a better understanding of this software development philosophy, we have to dive deeper into the incremental development used here. So when designing an increment, it uses a box structure. And these boxes are black box, which identifies the behavior, the state box, which deals with operations and the data of the state, and the clear box, which deals with the transition used by the state box. And by grouping the information about each increment in this way, it gives a pretty simple idea of what the goal of each increment is. Not only that, after each increment, there is a process of receiving feedback and as well as measuring quality. So feedback is given by the customer, and the quality of the increment is measured before moving forward with the next increment. Now, besides saving your software developers a headache later on in production, there's actually several good reasons why a company would choose to develop software in this manner. For instance, this can save money after the product have been shipped. There'll be less time needed to be spent on maintenance. Theoretically, not much at all. It'll give the initial version a much longer lifespan, since in theory it'll have no real major issues. Of course, this process will also most likely produce an overall better product, at least initially. So from launch, you'll have a much better product, and you'll be more likely to retain more users or customers moving forward. At this point, you might be thinking, this cleanroom software engineering sounds pretty nifty. I wonder why not everybody uses it. And that's because it comes at a cost. While it does produce high quality software, it's not as easy as flipping a switch to implement these software development practices. Not only that, there are most likely plenty of instances where this is not the best development philosophy to follow when developing certain kinds of software. An example of an issue that might arise when trying to use this development philosophy is the fact that you need a team that can use this development philosophy and also work very well together. To produce a software with no bugs can most likely be pretty frustrating at times, and it also requires you to know what you and your team are capable of, so that you can design each increment well enough to get what you need done. There are also several cases where having a software release with no issues isn't needed, such as an environment that is ever changing, such as something like social media. If you're going to need to be updating the software a lot either way, there will be bugs that will arise later, and there's no use in trying to prevent them coming out the gate. You're going to see bugs. Another issue with this is if there's issues. For instance, as I mentioned earlier, you might be asked to include an external service in your application later on in development. And of course, this will come with some debugging, as up until this point, your application was not made with this in mind. And while this is normally fine, this development philosophy is not necessarily built with this in mind. And while this won't slow things down to a complete halt, it might go back on some of the ideas that this is built upon. And while this philosophy aims to keep things simple, there surely is a learning curve to using it. Since it's very different in terms of some of the design and how the incrementing is done, it's different from other software development philosophies. However, for a software that doesn't require much updating and a team who can work well together using this design philosophy, cleanroom software engineering would be a very good option for producing a long-living and high-quality product that could be used for a long time to come. And it is definitely something for companies to consider when wondering how to develop their software. My name is Payne Meade. I hope you've enjoyed my presentation. I've left my sources down below, and I hope you have a good day.